It was a warm June evening, and the scent of fresh-cut grass lingered in the air. I sat on the patio, flipping through my planner. Our 10th wedding anniversary was less than a week away. I had been planning something special for months, a weekend getaway to the mountains, complete with candlelit dinners, wine tastings, and a handwritten letter I'd been drafting for weeks. "Hey babe, do you think I should pack the hiking boots or the dress shoes?" I called out to Emma, my wife. She was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone, her brow furrowed as though engrossed in something important. She didn't respond. I walked into the kitchen, placing my hand gently on her shoulder. She jumped, her phone clattering onto the countertop. Her reaction was unusually jittery. "Sorry you startled me," she said, forcing a smile. Her cheeks were flushed, and she quickly turned her phone screen face down on the counter. "That's a strong reaction for someone who's just scrolling Instagram," I said with a chuckle, though unease began to creep into my mind. She laughed it off and muttered something about being lost in thought. But her laugh was strained, and her eyes wouldn't meet mine. That night, as she showered, I sat on the bed scrolling through the reservations I'd made for the trip. My phone pinged, a notification from a shared photo album we had with some mutual friends. The notification showed Emma at a cafe I didn't recognize, laughing with a man I didn't know. I stared at the photo, my heart pounding. I wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe a work colleague, a friend of a friend. But something about the way her hand rested on his arm, the intimacy in the photo, made my stomach churn. Unable to resist, I searched her social media for clues. There wasn't much. Emma was careful. But then I remembered. Our laptop synced to her email. What I found turned my suspicion into certainty. There were emails, weeks of correspondence between Emma and this man. They weren't explicit, but the tone was unmistakable. Mentions of missing you, last week was amazing, and a planned meeting on the night before our anniversary. I sat in stunned silence, my world unraveling. The next morning, I sat at the breakfast table, my mind a storm of emotions. Emma hummed as she poured herself a cup of coffee, seemingly unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. My gaze lingered on her, searching for cracks in the image I had built of our life together. How long had this been going on? Was I blind? Or had she become an expert at hiding it? "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, her voice light and cheerful. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just a lot on my mind with work." The words felt hollow, but Emma didn't probe further. She rarely did. Over the next few days, I began piecing things together. I became hyper-aware of every detail. Her longer showers, her sudden need to work late, and her phone that was now always within arm's reach. My heart clenched when I overheard her giggle at a text she received while making dinner. I couldn't confront her, not yet. I needed to know everything before I acted. I called in sick to work one day, waiting until she left for her office. I rummaged through drawers, checked her computer history, even searched her car. The more I uncovered, the deeper the betrayal ran. Notes tucked in her purse, receipts for dinners at places we'd never been, and another man's name, Jason. The evidence was undeniable. Jason, a man I'd never met, whose name now burned into my thoughts like a brand. That night, as Emma slept beside me, I scrolled through her emails again. A new message from Jason popped up, counting down the hours until tomorrow night. "Can't wait to see you. Love you." I clenched my fist. Tomorrow night, one day before our anniversary. While I was planning to celebrate a decade of love, she was planning to meet him. I couldn't let it happen. The next morning, Emma kissed me goodbye as she left for work. I sat in the living room, staring at the clock, formulating a plan. My emotions oscillated between heartbreak and rage. Part of me wanted to confront her, demand answers, but another part wanted her to feel the pain I was enduring. I called my best friend, David. He had always been my sounding board, my voice of reason. When I explained everything, he went silent for a moment. "Look, man, you need to think this through. Acting out of anger could make things worse," he said finally. "I don't have time to think." "She's meeting him tonight," I snapped. David offered to come over, but I declined. This was my battle. As evening fell, I followed Emma. She was dressed in a way I hadn't seen in months. Her hair done, a sleek black dress hugging her figure. My heart ached as I watched her drive away, knowing she wasn't dressing up for me. Keeping a safe distance, I followed her to a dimly lit restaurant on the edge of town. Through the window, I saw her meet Jason, a tall, confident man who greeted her with an embrace that shattered what little resolve I had left. I took a deep breath, my fists clenching at my sides. This was the moment. I could storm in, expose her, create a scene that would leave no doubt about her betrayal. Or I could do something more calculated, something that would make her confront her actions in a way she'd never forget. I chose the latter. I sat in my car outside the restaurant, my mind racing as I finalized my plan. Every fiber of my being wanted to burst through those doors, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't just about exposing Emma. It was about making her understand the weight of her actions. I opened my phone and typed a message. Enjoying your dinner? I hope he's worth it. You've just destroyed everything we've built together. Happy anniversary. I hit send and watched through the restaurant window as Emma's phone buzzed on the table. She picked it up, her face instantly paling. Jason leaned in, asking her something, but she shook her head, fumbling with her phone. My phone buzzed moments later. Emma, what are you talking about? Where are you? I didn't reply. Instead, I got out of my car, straightened my jacket, and walked into the restaurant. As I stepped inside, the room seemed to freeze. Emma's eyes locked on mine, wide with panic. Jason turned to look at me, his confusion clear. The air between us was electric with tension. Hi, Emma, I said, my voice calm but ice cold. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? James, she stammered, her face a mix of guilt and fear. Jason stood, his demeanor shifting into defense mode. Who are you? He asked, his tone clipped. I'm her husband, I said, my gaze never leaving Emma. The color drained from Jason's face. He looked at Emma, his expression shifting to disbelief. You're married? I can explain, Emma blurted, tears brimming in her eyes. Explain. My voice rose, and for the first time, my anger broke through. Explain how you've been sneaking around behind my back. How you plan to celebrate our anniversary by meeting him. I gestured toward Jason, who looked like he wanted to disappear. The other patrons in the restaurant had begun to take notice, their hushed conversations creating a backdrop to the unfolding drama. Emma reached for my arm, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. You don't get to cry your way out of this. Jason cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Look, man, I didn't know. Save it, I snapped, cutting him off. You knew enough to meet her in secret. That's all I need to know about you. Emma's tears began to flow freely. James, please let's talk about this. Privately, I shook my head, my voice trembling with emotion. No, Emma. You made this public the moment you lied to me. The moment you betrayed me. This is your mess to clean up now. I turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Emma and Jason sitting in the wreckage of their secret. As I stepped into the cool night air, my chest felt heavy, but beneath the pain was a strange sense of clarity. My phone buzzed again. Emma was calling, but I let it go to voicemail. I needed time to process everything, to decide what my next step would be. For now, I had taken the first step. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I drove aimlessly through the city, the streetlights blurring as my mind replayed the scene over and over. Emma's tear-streaked face, Jason's stunned silence, the whispers from strangers in the restaurant. It all felt surreal, like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I finally pulled into an empty parking lot and sat in the car, staring at the dashboard. My heart was pounding, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The rush of adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation was gone, leaving only exhaustion and an ache so deep it felt like it might swallow me whole. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Emma but David. I debated ignoring it, but ultimately answered. Hey, I said, my voice hollow. How did it go? David asked cautiously. She didn't deny it, I said, my voice cracking. I confronted her in the middle of the restaurant. Everyone saw. David let out a low whistle. Man, that's rough. What are you going to do now? I don't know, I admitted. I can't think past what just happened. She destroyed everything, David. Everything we built together. There was a long pause before he spoke again. Look, I know this hurts, but you need to figure out what you want. Do you want to try to work this out? Or is this the end? His words hung in the air long after the call ended. Work this out? The idea felt impossible. But ending things? That felt like cutting off a limb, a necessary amputation, but one that would leave me scarred forever. When I finally returned home, the house was dark, but Emma was waiting for me in the living room. She looked up as I walked in, her eyes red and swollen. James, please, she started, her voice trembling. I held up a hand to stop her. Don't. Just don't. She nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, I spoke, my voice flat. How long has this been going on? 6 months, she whispered. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. 6 months. Half a year of lies and deceit, of sharing her life with someone else while pretending everything was fine with me. Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously. I don't know. I was lonely, James. You were always busy, always distracted with work. Jason made me feel noticed, alive. I repeated, incredulous. And what about me, Emma? Did it ever cross your mind how this would make me feel? How it would destroy me? She sobbed harder, but I felt no sympathy. Not anymore. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I still love you, James. I want to fix this. Her words felt empty, hollow. Love. If she loved me, how could she have done this? I don't know if I can believe you, I said finally. Or if I even want to. The room fell silent again, the weight of her betrayal suffocating us both. That night, I slept in the guest room. Or rather, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. Could I forgive her? Could I ever trust her again? Or was this the end of everything we'd built together? The days following the confrontation were a blur of cold silences, tense conversations, and endless self-reflection. Emma tried repeatedly to apologize, to explain, but every word she said only seemed to reopen the wound. On the third night, she handed me a letter before heading upstairs. Read it when you're ready, she said quietly. I stared at the envelope for hours before finally opening it. The words inside were raw, filled with regret and a desperate plea for another chance. She admitted to her mistakes, owned up to her choices, and begged me not to let this be the end. I know I've shattered your trust, she wrote, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn it back. Therapy, counseling, anything. I don't want to lose us, James. Please don't let my mistakes erase the love we've shared for 10 years. Her words stirred something in me, but they didn't erase the pain. Trust wasn't something that could be repaired with apologies or promises. It was a foundation, and ours had been cracked beyond recognition. The next day, I made an appointment with a marriage counselor, not because I believed we could fix things, but because I needed clarity, an understanding of whether our relationship could survive this or if it was better to let it go. In our first session, Emma broke down, detailing how she had felt neglected and unappreciated. It wasn't an excuse, but it was a perspective I hadn't considered in my grief. You weren't there, James, she said through tears. I know what I did was wrong, but I felt invisible in our marriage. And then Jason, he noticed me. Her words stung, but they forced me to reflect on my role in our relationship. I had been so focused on work, on providing a life of comfort, that I had overlooked the emotional connection that once bound us. The counselor helped us navigate these difficult truths. Over several weeks, Emma and I began to communicate more openly than we had in years. I saw her vulnerability, her genuine remorse, and for the first time, I allowed myself to consider the possibility of forgiveness. But forgiveness didn't come easily. Every time I looked at her, I saw the betrayal. Every text alert, every late night phone call filled me with suspicion. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, scrolling through old photos of us. The joy on her face, the way she looked at me with unfiltered love, it felt like a different lifetime. I realized then that the woman in those photos was still here, but the man she loved had been distant for far too long. The next morning, I made a decision. I'll try, I told Emma over coffee. But this isn't going to be easy. Trust will take time, and I need to see that you're as committed to rebuilding this as I am. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll do whatever it takes, James. I promise. We began rebuilding, brick by brick. Counseling became a cornerstone of our recovery. Emma cut ties with Jason completely, even showing me the messages where she ended things. Slowly, the walls between us began to come down. Months later, on what would have been our 11th anniversary, we revisited the cabin in the mountains, the trip I had originally planned before discovering her infidelity. Sitting by the fire, Emma handed me a new letter. This time, it wasn't an apology. It was a reflection on how far we'd come, a promise to never take me or our relationship for granted again. As I read the letter, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Our marriage wasn't perfect. It never would be. But for the first time in a long time, I believed we had a chance. The scars of betrayal would always be there, but so would the lessons we had learned. And as I looked into Emma's eyes, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. This time, I vowed not to let her feel invisible again.